good evening. It's Wednesday evening. I've been up since 6:20 and made videos since 6:30. Like, I don't know how many hours, that's 9. Let's close my windows, go to bed. Yes, let's read about Henry Ford. The Henry Ford, the designer of the Ford quadricycle and the first Ford A, the old Ford cars, and the Ford T. So actually, Henry Ford was a farmer. He come out from the country, a farmer family. He did like to work on the farm, and he likes machines, and he built. He's not just a rich boy with a rich daddy. He made his car. He made his car by his hand, by himself. In a garage, he built this Ford quadricycle, and then he did start to make this Ford A from a small factory, and he did it by himself. He worked on the ground and assembled cars and engines and worked with the workers. He did that in the first year, but of course not like the 40. Then he get rich. But I think he was a simple man. He only had like a primary school degrees. And he did not smoke, not smoking tobacco and not drinking alcohol. He only likes, if he's just staying at his wife, he just like his wife and family. So I don't know if he's investing money in stock. I don't think he's gamble on the stock markets. I don't know what he's spending. I think he did spend his money on his factory. I don't know what he spent his money on. Not really, he's not that big spender. He's just staying at his wife. Then he built 15 million Ford T's. And now I will go to bed.
Henry Ford. Page semi-protected. Henry Ford 1919.jpg. Portrait by Fred Hartsook. C. 1919, born July 30, 1863, Springwells Township, Michigan. U.S. Died April 7, 1947, aged 83. Dearborn, Michigan. U.S. Resting place St. Martha's Episcopal Church Cemetery, Detroit, Michigan. Occupations: engineer, industrialist, philanthropist. Years active: 1891-1945. Known for founding and leading the Ford Motor Company, pioneering a system that launched the mass production and sale of affordable automotives to the public. Henry Ford, the 30th of July, 1863, the 7th of April, 1947, was an American industrialist and business magnate. He was founder of Ford Motor Company, and chief developer of assembly line technique of mass production. Ford created the first automobile that middle-class Americans could afford, and his conversion of the automobile from an expensive luxury into an accessible conveyance profoundly impacted the landscape of the 20th century. Ford was born on a farm in Michigan's Springwells Township, leaving home at age 16 to work in Detroit. It was a few years before this time that Ford first experienced automobiles, and throughout the later half of the 1880s Ford began repairing and later constructing engines, and through the 1890s worked with a division of Edison Electric. He officially founded Ford Motor Company in 1903, after prior failures in business but success in constructing automobiles. Ford's 1908 introduction of the Model T automobile revolutionized both transportation and American industry. As the Ford Motor Company sole owner, he became one of the richest and best-known people in the world. He is credited with Fordism, the mass production of fine expensive goods coupled with high wages for workers. Ford was also among the pioneers of the 5-day work week. Ford had a global vision, with consumerism as the key to peace. His intense commitment to systematically lowering costs resulted in many technical and business innovations, including a franchise system that put dealerships throughout North America and major cities on 6 continents. Ford was widely known for his pacifism during the first years of World War I. In the 1920s Ford promoted anti-Semitic content through his newspaper The Dearborn Independent, and the book, The International Jew. After her son Edsel died in 1943, Ford resumed control of the company but was too frail to make decisions and quickly came under the control of subordinates. He turned over the title President of Ford Motor Company, 1906, 1919, 1943, 1945, political party Republican, before 1918. Democratic, after 1918. Spouse Clara Jane Bryant, M. 1888, children Edsel signature Henry Ford signature. SVG. Company to his grandson Henry Ford II in 1945. He died in 1947 after leaving most of his wealth to the Ford Foundation, and control of the company to his family. Early life. Henry Ford was born the 30th of July, 1863, on a farm in Springwells Township, Michigan. 1. His father, William Ford, 1826-1905, was born in County Cork, Ireland, to a family that had emigrated from Somerset, England in the 16th century. 2. His mother, Mary Ford, née Togo, 1839-1876, was born in Michigan as the youngest child of Belgian immigrants. Her parents died when she was a child and she was adopted by neighbors, the O'Hearns. Henry Ford's siblings were Margaret Ford, 1867-1938, Jane Ford, c. 1868-1945, William Ford, 1871-1917, and Robert Ford, 1873-1934. Ford finished 8th grade at a one-room school, 3, Springwells Middle School. He never attended high school. He later took a bookkeeping course at a commercial school. 4. His father gave him a pocket watch when he was 12. At 15, Ford dismantled and reassembled the timepieces of friends and neighbors dozens of times, gaining the reputation of a watch repairman. 5. At 20, Ford walked 4 miles to their Episcopal church every Sunday. 6. Ford was devastated when his mother died in 1876. His father expected him to take over the family farm eventually, but he despised farm work. He later wrote, "I never had any particular love for the farm. It was mother on the farm I loved." 7. In 1879, Ford left home to work as an apprentice machinist in Detroit, first with James F. Flower and Brothers and later with the Detroit Dry Dock Company. In 1882, he returned to Dearborn to work on the family farm where he became adept at operating the Westinghouse portable steam engine. He was later hired by Westinghouse to service their steam engines. 8. Ford related 2 significant events occurred in 1875 when he was 12. He received the watch, and he witnessed the operation of a Nichols and Shepard road engine. the first vehicle other than horse-drawn that I had ever seen. In his farm workshop, Ford built a steam wagon or tractor and a steam car, but Hout steam was not suitable for light vehicles as the boiler was dangerous. Ford also said that he did not see the use of experimenting with electricity, due to the expense of trolley wires, and no storage battery was in sight of a weight that was practical. In 1885, Ford repaired an Otto engine, and in 1887 he built a four-cycle model with a 1-inch bore and a 3-inch stroke. In 1890, Ford started work on a 2-cylinder engine. Ford stated, "In 1892, I completed my first motor car, powered by a 2-cylinder 4-horsepower motor with a 2.5-inch bore and a 6-inch stroke, which was connected to a counter shaft by a belt and then to the rear wheel by a chain. The belt was shifted by a clutch lever to control speeds at 10 or 20 miles per hour, augmented by a throttle." Other features included 28-inch wire bicycle wheels with rubber tires, a foot brake, a 3-gallon gasoline tank, and later, a water jacket around the cylinders for cooling. Ford at Tot in the spring of 1893. The machine was running to my partial satisfaction and giving an opportunity further to test out the design and material on the road. Between 1895 and 1896, Ford drove that machine about 1,000 miles. He then started a second car in 1896, eventually building 3 of them in his home workshop. 9. Marriage and family. Henry Ford in 1888, aged 25, Ford married Clara Jane Bryant, 1866-1950, on the 11th of April, 1888, and supported himself by farming and running a sawmill. 10. They had one killed, Edsel Ford, 1893-1943. 11. Career. In 1891, Ford became an engineer with the Edison Illuminating Company of Detroit. After his promotion to chief engineer in 1893, he had enough time and money to devote attention to his experiments on gasoline engines. These experiments culminated in 1896 with the completion of a self-propelled vehicle, which he named the Ford Quadricycle. He test drove it on June 4th. After various test drives, Ford brainstormed ways to improve the quadricycle. 12. Also in 1896, Ford attended a meeting of Edison executives, where he was introduced to Thomas Edison. Edison approved of Ford's automobile experimentation. Encouraged by Edison, Ford designed and built a second vehicle, completing it in 1898. 13. Backed by the capital of Detroit lumber baron William H. Murphy, Ford resigned from the Edison Company and founded the Detroit Automobile Company on August 5, 1899. 13. However, the automobiles produced were of a lower quality and higher price than Ford wanted. Ultimately, the company was not successful and was dissolved in January 1901. 13. With the help of C. Harold Wills, Ford designed, built, and successfully raced a 26-horsepower automobile in October 1901. With this success, Murphy and other stockholders in the Detroit Automobile Company formed the Henry Ford Company on the 30th of November 1901, with Ford as chief engineer. 13. In 1902 Murphy brought in Henry M. Leland as a consultant. Ford, in response, left the company bearing his name. With Ford gone, Leland renamed the company the Cadillac Automobile Company. 13. Teaming up with former racing cyclist Tom Cooper, Ford also produced the 80-plus horsepower Racer 999, which Barney Oldfield was to drive to victory in a race in October 1902. Ford received the backing of an old acquaintance, Alexander Y. Malcolmson, a Detroit area coal dealer. 13. They formed a partnership, Ford and Malcolmson, Limited, to manufacture automobiles. Ford went to work designing an inexpensive automobile, and the duo leased a factory and contracted with a machine shop owned by John and Horace Dodge to supply over $160,000 in parts. 13. Sales were slow, and a crisis arose when the Dodge brothers demanded payment for their first shipment. Ford Motor Company. In response, Malcolmson brought in another group of investors and convinced the Dodge brothers to accept a portion of the new company. 13. Ford and Malcolmson was reincorporated as the Ford Motor Company on June 16, 1903. 13. With $28,000 capital. The original investors included Ford and Malcolmson, the Dodge brothers, Malcolmson's uncle John S. Gray, Malcolmson's secretary James Cousins, and two of Malcolmson's lawyers, John W. Anderson and Horace Rackham. Because of Ford's volatility, Gray was Henry Ford with Thomas Edison and Harvey S. Firestone. Fort Myers, Florida, the 11th of February, 1929. Elected president of the company. Ford then demonstrated a newly designed car on the ice of Lake St. Clair, driving 1 mile, 1.6 km, in 39.4 seconds and setting a new land speed record at 91.3 miles per hour, 146.9 km per hour. Convinced by this success, race driver Barney Oldfield, who named this new Ford Model 999 in honor of the fastest locomotive of the day, took the car around the country, making the Ford brand known throughout the United States. Ford also was one of the early backers of the Indianapolis 500. Model T. The Model T debuted on the 1st of October, 1908. It had the steering wheel on V-lift, which every other company soon copied. The entire engine and transmission were enclosed, the 4 cylinders were cast in a solid block, the suspension used 2 semi-elliptic springs. The car was very simple to drive, and easy and cheap to repair. It was so cheap at $825 in 1908, $24,880 today, with the price falling every year, that by the 1920s, a majority of American drivers had learned to drive on the Model T. 14. 15. Despite the fact that drivers who were only familiar with the Model T's unique foot-operated planetary transmission and steering column-operated throttle-cum-accelerator had to learn a completely different set of skills to drive any other gasoline-powered automobile of the time. Ford assembly line. 1913. Ford created a huge publicity machine in Detroit to ensure every newspaper carried stories and ads about the new product. Ford's network of local dealers made the car ubiquitous in almost every city in North America. As independent dealers, the franchises grew and publicized not just the Ford but also the concept of automobiling. Local motor clubs sprang up to help new drivers and encourage them to explore the countryside. Ford was always eager to sell to farmers, who looked at the vehicle as a commercial device to help their business. Sales skyrocketed several years, posted 100% gains on the previous year. In 1913, Ford introduced move-in assembly belts into his plants, which enabled an enormous increase in production. Although Ford is often credited with the idea, contemporary sources indicate that the concept and development came from employees Clarence Avery, Peter E. Martin, Charles E. Sorensen, and C. Harold Wills. 16. C. Ford Piquette Avenue plant. Sales passed 250,000 in 1914. By 1916, as the price dropped to $360 for the basic touring car, sales reached 472,000. 17. By 1918, half of all cars in the United States were Model Ts. All new cars were black. As Ford wrote in his autobiography, any customer can have a car painted any color that he wants so long as it is black. 18. Until the development of the assembly line, which mandated black because of its quicker drying time. Model TS were available in other colors, including red. The design was fervently promoted and defended by Ford, and production continued as late as 1927. The final total production was 15,007,034. This record stood for the next 45